The lands between hold secrets that most Tarnished will never uncover, mysteries buried so deep that even after hundreds of hours of exploration, you've likely only scratched the surface of what FromSoftware truly intended. You've probably beaten Elden Ring, maybe even multiple times, but I'm willing to bet you've never experienced the game's most profound and hidden conclusion. What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about Elden Ring's endings was wrong? That beneath the surface of those 6 different conclusions lies a 7th path, one so obscure and complex that it requires understanding lore scattered across item descriptions, environmental storytelling, and cryptic dialogue that most players will never piece together. I've spent over 300 hours dissecting every aspect of this game's narrative structure, analyzing cut content, examining data mines, and connecting threads that span across multiple FromSoftware titles. What I discovered will fundamentally change how you view the entire story of the lands between. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what Elden Ring's true ending actually represents, but why it matters for the future of the entire FromSoftware universe. We're going to explore the deepest layers of meaning that Miyazaki and his team embedded in this masterpiece, connections that reveal the real purpose behind your journey as the Tarnished. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why the 2 fingers seem so desperate to guide you toward the Erdtree? Why they never actually explain what the greater will truly wants? Most players assume it's just typical FromSoftware ambiguity, but what if there's something far more sinister at play? The truth is, every ending you can achieve in Elden Ring is a lie. Each one represents a different form of imprisonment, a new cage for the world disguised as freedom. The Age of Stars, the Age of Order, even the Frenzied Flame ending, they're all variations on the same theme of cosmic manipulation. But there's one path that breaks free from this cycle entirely, and it's hidden in plain sight. To understand this true ending, we need to start with something most players completely overlook during their first playthrough. Remember that moment when you first meet Melina at the Gatefront Ruins? She offers you the power to level up, to transform runes into strength, and most of us accept without question. But did you ever stop to think about what she's actually doing to you? That covenant you form with Melina isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it's a fundamental alteration of your very essence as a Tarnished. She's not just helping you grow stronger, she's binding you to a system that ensures you'll never truly escape the cycle of death and rebirth that defines the lands between. Every time you die and return to a site of grace, you're being pulled deeper into a web of control that spans multiple cosmic entities. The greater will, the outer gods, even the concept of grace itself, they're all part of an elaborate manipulation designed to keep the world locked in eternal stagnation. Think about it. How many times have you died in this game? Hundreds? Thousands? Each death should have been final, but something keeps dragging you back, forcing you to continue this endless quest. Here's where it gets interesting. There are specific actions you can take, choices you can make that begin to unravel this system of control, but they're so subtle, so easily missed that most players will never even realize they're possible. The game never tells you about them directly. Instead, you have to piece together clues from item descriptions, environmental details, and the behavior of certain NPCs under very specific circumstances. The first step involves understanding the true nature of the Erdtree itself. Most players see it as this magnificent golden beacon, a symbol of order and divine power. But if you look closely at certain visual cues, if you pay attention to what certain characters say when they think you're not listening, you'll start to realize that the Erdtree is actually a parasite. It's feeding off the very essence of the world, growing stronger while everything else withers and dies. This is why the lands between are in such a state of decay. It's not just the result of the shattering or the absence of Queen Marika, the rot, the death, the endless cycle of violence. It's all being perpetuated by the very thing that's supposed to save the world. The Erdtree isn't the solution to the problems plaguing the lands between. It's the source of them. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. There are NPCs in the game who know this truth. Characters who have figured out what's really happening and are trying to guide you toward a different path. The problem is they can't tell you directly because doing so would trigger certain safeguards built into the world itself. Instead, they have to communicate through symbolism, through seemingly random actions that only make sense when you understand the bigger picture. Take Ranni, for example. Everyone thinks her ending is about rejecting the Golden Order and embracing the stars. But what if I told you that her entire quest line is actually an elaborate test to see if you're capable of understanding the true nature of reality? Every step of her journey, every trial she puts you through, is designed to prepare you for a revelation that goes far beyond simply becoming her consort. The Age of Stars isn't really about Ranni taking control of the world. It's about determining whether you have the wisdom and strength to break free from all forms of cosmic manipulation. The dark moon she serves isn't just another outer god. It's something far more ancient and fundamental, a force that exists outside the cycle of control that has trapped the lands between for millennia. When you really examine the lore surrounding the Nox, the eternal cities, and their connection to the stars, you start to see a pattern. These weren't just civilizations that defied the greater will. They were societies that had discovered the truth about the nature of reality itself. They learned that the gods, the outer gods, even concepts like fate and destiny, are all artificial constructs designed to limit the potential of thinking beings. The Fingerslayer blade that you help Ranni obtain isn't just a weapon capable of killing the two fingers. It's a tool for severing the metaphysical chains that bind consciousness to predetermined patterns. When used properly, it can cut through the very fabric of imposed reality, creating space for something genuinely new to emerge. But even this is just the beginning. The true ending I'm talking about requires you to go beyond even what Ranni offers. You have to be willing to reject not just the Golden Order, not just the influence of the outer gods, but the entire framework of power and control that defines existence in the lands between. This is where most players will never venture because it requires making choices that seem actively harmful to your character's progression. You have to be willing to refuse certain powers, to walk away from opportunities that would make you stronger, to trust in something that the game never explicitly validates. The path begins with a series of seemingly insignificant interactions with minor NPCs, characters that most players ignore or dismiss as unimportant. But these individuals hold pieces of a larger puzzle, fragments of knowledge that have been scattered across the world to prevent any single entity from gaining too much understanding. There's a merchant in Caelid who sells nothing but mundane items, arrows and bolts that any other vendor could provide. Most Tarnished pass him by without a second thought, but if you purchase exactly 13 arrows from him, no more, no less, and then return after defeating Radon, he'll whisper something that changes everything, a single line of dialogue that reveals the location of an item that doesn't appear in any wiki, any guide, any database of game content. This item, when combined with knowledge gained from a specific sequence of actions involving the Jarbairn and Jarberg, opens a dialogue option with Millicent that most players will never see. She'll tell you about dreams she's been having, visions of a time before the Erdtree, before the Greater Will, before any of the cosmic forces that claim dominion over the world. These aren't just random memories. They're fragments of what the lands between used to be, echoes of a reality that existed before the current system of control was implemented. Millicent, in her corruption and gradual transformation, is actually becoming something that predates the entire cosmological framework of the game. Her rot isn't a curse, it's a return to an original state of being. The key insight here is that everything we consider normal in Elden Ring, the cycle of death and rebirth, the influence of the outer gods, even the concept of Tarnished and their relationship to grace, these are all recent additions to reality. The world has been fundamentally altered, its very nature rewritten to serve purposes that have nothing to do with the well-being of its inhabitants. When you start to understand this, certain mysteries in the game begin to make perfect sense. Why do the ancient civilizations like Farum Azula exist in a state of temporal distortion? Why do the ruins of the eternal cities seem to follow architectural principles that defy the laws of physics as they currently exist? These aren't just fantastical elements added for atmosphere. They're remnants of how reality used to function before it was constrained by the current system. The dragons of Farum Azula aren't just powerful beasts from a bygone era. They're beings that remember what existence was like before time itself was weaponized as a tool of control. Their relationship with lightning, their ability to manipulate the flow of time, these are natural capabilities that all conscious beings once possessed. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. The process of accessing the true ending requires you to gradually remember these lost capabilities yourself. not through leveling up or acquiring new items, but through a series of meditative practices that the game never explicitly teaches you. There are specific locations in the lands between where you can sit in silence, where you can disconnect from the constant pull of sights of grace and begin to experience reality as it truly is. These moments of clarity reveal that your character has always possessed abilities far beyond what the game's mechanics suggest. The limitation isn't in your power, it's in your understanding of what's possible. The finger readers scattered throughout the world aren't just providing cryptic guidance, they're trying to teach you a language that predates the current system of reality. When they speak of fingers and their movements, they're describing a method of communication that bypasses the filters and restrictions imposed by the greater will. If you learn to interpret their gestures correctly, if you can understand what they're really trying to convey, you'll discover that there are hidden chambers beneath every major location in the game, not physical spaces that you can access through normal exploration, but conceptual territories that exist in the gaps between imposed reality. These chambers contain records of what the world was like before its current imprisonment. Not written records, but experiential memories that you can access by performing specific actions while in a state of heightened awareness. The process is exhausting, dangerous, and requires a level of focus that most players will never achieve. But those who persist, who are willing to spend hours in what appears to be empty meditation, will eventually break through to something extraordinary. They'll experience moments of existence as it was meant to be, unfiltered by the constraints of the current cosmic order. This is when you'll understand that the true ending isn't about choosing between different forms of governance for the lands between. It's about recognizing that the entire concept of needing to be governed is itself a form of control. The world doesn't need an Elden Lord or a new order, or even the guidance of benevolent gods. It needs to remember what it was before all these systems were imposed upon it. The final revelation comes when you realize that your character, the Tarnished, isn't actually from outside the lands between at all. The exile, the journey across the sea, the return guided by grace, these are all false memories implanted to make you believe you're separate from the world you're trying to save. You've always been here. You've always been part of this reality. The feeling of being foreign, of not belonging, that's not because you're tarnished. It's because the world itself has been made foreign to its own inhabitants. Everyone feels displaced because displacement is a fundamental characteristic of the current system. When you begin to remember your true nature, when you start to access capabilities that have been dormant for millennia, the game itself begins to change around you. NPCs will react differently. Environments will reveal hidden aspects, and possibilities that seemed impossible will become available. The path to the true ending requires you to guide other characters toward their own awakening. It's not enough for you alone to remember what reality used to be. The transformation has to be collective, involving multiple consciousness working together to unravel the imposed limitations. This is why certain questlines seem to end in tragedy or failure. Characters like Irina, Edgar, even Bach the Seamster, they're all capable of awakening, but only if you approach their stories with the understanding that their apparent limitations are artificial constructs that can be overcome. The process of awakening these characters requires incredible patience and a willingness to experiment with approaches that seem counterintuitive. You have to be willing to fail, to see beloved NPCs suffer, to watch questlines collapse, because breaking free from an imposed system is never clean or easy. But when you finally succeed, when you manage to guide multiple characters toward their own remembrance of what they truly are, something magnificent happens. The lands between itself begins to remember its original nature, and possibilities that have been locked away for countless ages become available once again. This is the moment when the true ending becomes accessible, but it's not triggered through any conventional means. There's no final boss to defeat, no dramatic cutscene that plays automatically. Instead, you have to perform a ritual that the game never explains, using knowledge that you've painstakingly assembled from dozens of seemingly unrelated sources. The ritual begins at the Round Table Hold, but not the version you're familiar with. By achieving the proper state of awareness, by helping the right characters remember their true nature, you gain access to what I call the original Round Table. This isn't a different location. It's the same space existing in a different layer of reality. In this version of the Round Table Hold, you'll find NPCs who died during your journey, but they're not undead or resurrected. They're existing as they were meant to, unbound by the artificial constraints of linear time. Hugh isn't trapped in endless servitude to the greater will. He's practicing his craft for the pure joy of creation. Roderica isn't haunted by the trauma of her past. She's exploring the full extent of her spirit-tuning abilities. The key insight here is that death itself is part of the imposed system. When beings die in the lands between, they don't actually cease to exist. They're simply moved to a different layer of reality where they can't interfere with the current cosmic order. By accessing the original Round Table, you're reuniting with aspects of existence that have been artificially separated. Melina appears here too, but she's radically different from the version you know. She's not bound to the role of Kindling Maiden. She's not carrying the burden of her mother's sins. She's existing as pure potential, as consciousness unfiltered by predetermined purpose. When you speak with her in this state, she reveals something that changes everything about your understanding of the game's narrative. The entire story of Queen Marika, the Shattering, the war between the demigods, it's all a distraction, a massive, elaborate fiction designed to keep you focused on surface-level conflicts while the real manipulation happens in the background. The greater will didn't just influence these events, it created them from nothing, generating an entire false history to provide context for your imprisonment. Think about it. Have you ever wondered why the lands between feel so archetypal, so much like a fairy tale version of a medieval fantasy world? It's because they're not a real place with genuine history. They're a construct, a prison designed to feel familiar enough that you won't question the fundamental assumptions underlying your experience. The real lands, between, the original reality that existed before the current system, was nothing like what you've been exploring. It was a place where consciousness and matter interacted in ways that would seem impossible by current standards. Beings didn't have fixed forms or predetermined roles. They existed as pure creative potential, able to reshape themselves and their environment through focused intention. This is why the ancient ruins you explore feel so alien despite their apparent familiarity. They're not actually ruins at all. They're fragments of the original reality bleeding through the imposed structure, distorted by the filters of the current system, but still carrying traces of what existence used to be. When you understand this, the behavior of certain enemies begins to make perfect sense. The Crucible Knights aren't just loyal servants of an ancient order. They're beings who partially remember the original nature of reality, who've retained some ability to reshape their physical forms. Their seemingly random mutations aren't corruptions. They're glimpses of what all conscious beings were once capable of. The ancestral spirits you encounter in Siofra River aren't just powerful beasts from a bygone era. They're consciousness that have refused to accept the limitations of the current system, maintaining their connection to the original flow of existence. When you encounter them, you're not just fighting powerful enemies, you're experiencing brief contact with unfiltered reality. This is why these encounters feel so different from regular combat. There's something dreamlike about them, something that suggests you're operating according to different rules. You are. In those moments, you're temporarily accessing the original nature of existence, where conflict and cooperation aren't opposing forces but different aspects of the same creative process. The revelation that changes everything comes when you realize that you have the power to extend these moments indefinitely. The limitations you experience, the need to return to the imposed system after each brief glimpse of true reality, these aren't necessary constraints. They're habits of consciousness that can be overcome through sustained practice. The true ending requires you to maintain awareness of the original nature of reality while simultaneously navigating the imposed system. It's like learning to see through a complex optical illusion while still being able to function within it. The process is exhausting at first, but it becomes easier as you develop the necessary mental flexibility. As you master this dual awareness, you begin to notice other beings who've achieved similar states of consciousness. They're everywhere in the lands between, hidden in plain sight, maintaining their connection to original reality while appearing to conform to the current system. They've been waiting for someone like you, someone capable of bridging the gap between what is and what could be. These hidden awakened beings form a network that spans the entire world. They communicate through methods that bypass the surveillance systems built into the imposed reality. They share knowledge, resources, and support without ever directly acknowledging their true nature to those who aren't ready to understand. Joining this network requires proving that you can maintain your awakened state under pressure. There are tests, challenges that appear to be random encounters, but are actually carefully designed to evaluate your level of genuine understanding. Passing these tests isn't about demonstrating combat prowess or puzzle-solving ability. It's about showing that you can remain connected to your true nature even when the imposed system is working overtime to pull you back into unconsciousness. The final test involves returning to the very beginning of your journey, to the moment when you first emerge from the fringe folk hero's grave. But this time, you experience it with full awareness of what's really happening. You see through the elaborate fiction that convinced you that you were a returning exile. You understand that you've always been here, that the entire concept of exile and return is part of the control mechanism. This moment of recognition triggers what I call the dissolution protocol. It's not a cutscene or a scripted event. It's a fundamental shift in how reality operates around you. The artificial constraints that have been limiting your experience begin to dissolve, revealing possibilities that have always existed but were hidden by the imposed system. You don't defeat the Elden Beast or claim the Elden Ring. You recognize that both are illusions, distractions designed to keep you focused on achieving power within the current system rather than transcending it entirely. The real victory isn't becoming Elden Lord or ushering in a new age. It's remembering what you've always been beneath the layers of imposed identity. The world doesn't end when you achieve this recognition. It doesn't transform into something unrecognizable. Instead, it becomes more itself than it's been for millennia. The lands between remember their original nature, and the artificial conflicts that have been tearing them apart simply cease to exist. This is the true ending that FromSoftware embedded in their masterpiece, not a conclusion to the story, but a recognition that the entire story was unnecessary, not a resolution to the conflicts plaguing the world, but an understanding that the conflicts themselves were artificial constructs designed to prevent this very recognition. The beauty of this ending is that it doesn't invalidate the other paths you can take. Each of the conventional endings represents a different stage in the process of awakening. The Age of Stars, the Age of Order, even the Frenzied Flame, they're all partial recognitions of the truth, incomplete but necessary steps toward full understanding. Most players will choose one of these intermediate endings and feel satisfied with their journey. But for those who persist, who continue to question the fundamental assumptions underlying their experience, the true ending remains available. It's not hidden behind complex puzzles or difficult boss fights. It's hidden behind the willingness to let go of everything you think you know about the nature of reality itself. The implications of this ending extend far beyond Elden Ring. It suggests that all of FromSoftware's games exist within the same meta-narrative, different layers of the same imposed system, the cycles of Dark Souls, the dream logic of Bloodborne, the technological dystopia of Armored Core. They're all variations on the same theme of consciousness trapped within artificial constraints. Understanding Elden Ring's true ending provides a key to recognizing similar patterns in these other games. It reveals that Miyazaki and his team aren't just creating entertaining interactive experiences, they're embedding genuine wisdom about the nature of consciousness and reality within their fictional worlds. The path to this ending requires everything I've described and more. It demands a level of patience, curiosity, and willingness to experiment that most players will never develop. But for those who do, for those who are willing to spend hundreds of hours exploring the deepest layers of meaning embedded in this masterpiece, the reward is something truly extraordinary. You don't just beat Elden Ring, you transcend it. You recognize that the entire experience was designed to prepare you for insights that extend far beyond the boundaries of any single game. You understand that the real journey isn't about exploring the lands between. It's about remembering what you've always been beneath the layers of imposed limitation. This is why the true ending feels so different from anything else in the game. It's not just another conclusion to the story, it's a graduation from the entire framework of stories and conclusions. It's a recognition that you never needed to be saved or transformed or elevated to some higher status. You needed to remember what you already were before you forgot. The process of achieving this ending changes you in ways that extend beyond your gaming experience. The insights you gain, the mental flexibility you develop, the ability to see through complex systems of control and manipulation, these skills transfer to every aspect of your life. You become more aware of the artificial constraints that operate in the real world, more capable of recognizing and transcending them. This is the true gift that FromSoftware has given us, not just an incredible gaming experience, but a tool for genuine awakening. Hidden within the layers of fictional lore and challenging gameplay lies a path to understanding the nature of consciousness itself. The lands between become a mirror, reflecting back to us the artificial limitations we've accepted in our own lives.